We saw during the pandemic that Big Pharma refused to let countries around the world develop their own pharmaceuticals for the COVID vaccine. They said, no, we are going to make sure that you can't get any of the information in order to be able to produce your own. So I think that the fact that many people died around the world, that the pharmaceutical companies have been responsible for that. We were able to provide in the Inflation Reduction Act to lower the cost, to negotiate the cost of prescription drugs, to lower them. That had been done on 10 drugs, and we are going to see those prices go down. And I assure you that the pharmaceutical companies have not been happy about doing that. That we have made insulin so available to Americans at $35 a month. You know, that insulin costs about $1 to make. And yet we have seen in the past hundreds of dollars being charged by the pharmaceutical companies. Unfortunately, these benefits have only gone to people that are getting Medicare right now. And I know that the administration, our Democratic administration, has said they want it applied to all Americans. So we can make serious progress, and we should, and we need to hold accountable Big Pharma.
Before I poured the milk on the cereal, I checked the expiration date on the product, and it was okay. Why is there an expiration date on the product, on dairy products? The next witness is responsible for it. She led the consumer effort to put expiration dates on dairy products as a mom and as an activist, and led her to a career in government. She is the penultimate voice in our delegation when it comes to consumer protection, and it's my honor to recognize my colleague, Congresswoman Schakowsky.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Durbin, and for having this hearing today. It's so incredibly important. I agree with everything that you said and with my colleague has said, but it's never said enough. And I want to say that in 2020, 5 of the the largest pharmaceutical companies made in profits $80 billion. This is larger than any other company in the United States of America, big tech, or big, any other organization. They made more money. And yet, Americans are paying 2 to 3 times as much for pharmaceuticals, the exact same pharmaceuticals that are available around the world. I mean, I think that the American consumer is really viewed as kind of a chump by the pharmaceutical industry. I am very, very concerned about the kinds of activities that Big Pharma has done to make sure that they protect their own profits. We are seeing that the pharmaceutical companies have gone to a number of the hospitals and changed the rules around it's 340B, and made it harder for the hospitals to be able to make sure when they're low-income patients and the low income they're trying to provide to them, But the pharmaceutical companies have changed some of the rules, and maybe we'll hear from some of our experts about that. I want to say also that I have offered legislation that I hope will pass in the next session that will allow people to import from certain countries like Canada to be able to have lower cost drugs and to import them into the United States of America. And I also am introducing legislation that would allow the Department of Health and Human Services to be able to create more affordable drugs by manufacturing those drugs. So we should be not just handing over patents to the big pharma companies to do what they want with us as Americans. And I am looking forward in the next session of Congress, being the optimist that I am, that we are going to be changing some of those rules and practices by big pharma, and that we're going to be able to get all Americans to be able to afford the drugs that they need for their lives and deserve. Let me just say one more thing. I was at a drugstore where a woman before me was told by the pharmacist how much she had to pay. And very quickly she said, well, I simply can't. And she walked away without the drugs that she needed. This is happening all across the country. It needs to stop. And with that, I yield back.
Chair Durbin, my name is Rachel Sachs, and I'm a professor of law at Washington University in St. Louis, where my research focuses on innovation and access to new pharmaceuticals. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about the role of competition in making prescription drugs more affordable for patients and how this committee might address these issues. All views I offer today are my own. Over the last 40 years, Congress has focused on competition from lower-cost generic and biosimilar versions of branded prescription drugs as the primary tool to bring down prices and promote access to affordable medications. 1984 saw the passage of the Hatch-Waxman Act, which created a path to FDA approval for generic versions of small molecule drugs. When combined with state laws allowing pharmacists to substitute generics for branded drugs, Hatch-Waxman has been largely successful. Today, generic drugs quickly take over 80% of the branded drugs market share, and multiple generics can drive down prices by over 90%. Of course, ongoing focus on branded drug manufacturers' attempts to delay generic competition matters, and I'll return to that. The Biologics Price Competition and Innovation Act, as enacted in the Affordable Care Act in 2010, created a path to approval for biosimilar versions of biological products. To date, this law has been less successful at creating competition than has Hatch-Waxman. Just 61 biosimilars for 17 biologics have been approved to date, and many have not yet been marketed. Even marketed biosimilars struggle to gain market share and have driven down prices by a smaller amount. The relative weakness of biosimilar competition is traceable to several factors. In my written testimony, for example, I refer to patent listing distinctions between the Orange and Purple books, the interchangeable designation, and comparatively weak state substitution laws as legal drivers. The Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, and its Medicare drug price negotiation program also looks to generic and biosimilar competition as the primary tool to drive down drug prices. Recognizing that Hatch-Waxman and the Biosimilars Act have not always succeeded in enabling generic and biosimilar entry, only if such competition has not emerged does the IRA envision a role for Medicare to negotiate the prices for drugs it purchases as a market participant. The IRA only permits a drug to qualify for negotiation after it has been FDA approved for many years, and a drug with an approved and marketed generic or biosimilar is not eligible for selection for negotiation. Hatch-Waxman and the Biosimilars Act aim to support approval of generics and biosimilars. This approval is necessary for competition, but is not sufficient to enable it. Take the biosimilars example. Even where a biosimilar is approved and marketed, it must be covered by insurers, physicians must prescribe it, and pharmacists must substitute it. Patents matter for creating competition at the approval stage, but legal changes must go beyond patent law to include insurance coverage, physician prescribing, and pharmacy substitution. This committee ought to consider legislation to improve competition, but a full response will require support from other committees with distinct jurisdictions. First, this committee should continue to focus on the approval of generics and biosimilars, where the PTO and patent law play key roles. This committee has already taken up several bills responding to branded manufacturers' efforts to discourage generic or biosimilars. The Federal Trade Commission's recent challenges to over 400 patents allegedly improperly listed in the Orange Book also fall into this category. Second, coverage. Many insurance coverage decisions are mediated through pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, about which we've heard already. PBMs have been criticized, including for the ways in which they sometimes appear to limit access to lower-cost products. Both the Federal Trade Commission and several state attorneys general have sued the nation's largest PBMs over their conduct in the market for insulin in particular. This committee should consider its role in PBM reform, including potentially supporting the Commission's complaint. Third, prescription. This committee might work collaboratively with others to encourage the prescribing of lower cost products. For example, experts have argued for reforming the Medicare Part B payment system, arguing that it encourages clinicians to choose higher priced products over lower priced ones. Fourth, substitution. State biosimilar substitution laws typically only permit substitution where the biosimilar is deemed interchangeable by FDA. Most approved biosimilars lack that designation. This committee might support efforts to alter state biosimilar substitution laws, as well as efforts by other committees regarding the interchangeable designation, as FDA has requested. This committee should support competition to make prescription drugs more affordable for patients. Chair Durbin, I appreciate your focus on this important issue, and I look forward to answering your questions.